Welcome to the Summercast, a podcast aimed at making fundamentalism great again by applying confessional Baptist doctrine to all of life.
Welcome to the Summercast, everybody. So glad you're able to tune in. Hey, I wanted to come on here and talk about 7 rules for voting. More specifically, 7 Christian rules for voting. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to abstain from talking about political candidates in their persons. I'm not going to talk about Donald Trump so much or Joe Biden or any of that. I'm not even going to talk about the partisanship of the United States. These are just principles that I believe are biblical, which will help you to discern what to do or how to behave at the polls as a Christian. Okay, so there's 7 of these, and we're just going to kind of go through them now. The first one is this: do not hold your breath for a Christian president. I think there are some people who sometimes hold their breath for a Christian president. And what I mean by that is that they really will not vote unless their president or the candidate who is wanting to be president acts or behaves just like a Christian would. And the reason I say don't hold your breath for a Christian president is because we don't live in a nation where it is required for the president to be Christian, okay? And so there are going to be all sorts of opportunities to cast a ballot, but there will most likely not be any opportunities to cast a ballot for a Christian president. And even if they were a professing Christian, you would still not even be able to tell whether or not they truly were, at least in terms of their heart. And so don't hold your breath for a Christian president. We don't live in a Christian nation, though our nation is certainly founded on biblical principles, constitutionally speaking, I believe. But we don't live in a Christian nation where it is required for all of our leadership or elected officials to be Christian before they can hold office. The second principle, I think, which is helpful to keep in mind, is this: do not get caught up in character flaws. Don't get caught up in character flaws. And now, obviously, I don't mean, not to care about character, especially character which is going to influence policy and how that person is going to approach the fulfillment of their office. Okay, so I'm not saying don't care about character traits that could potentially adversely affect a person's leadership skills or ability. What I mean here is that every time a person runs for president, say it is Trump or anyone else for that matter, the tendency of the media especially is to, especially if it's a candidate that the media is biased against, the tendency is for them to drag out all they can that is negative about that person. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter if it's George W. Bush. It doesn't matter if it's George H.W. Bush before him, Bill Clinton before George W. It doesn't matter if it's going all the way back to Reagan. It doesn't matter if it's him. The media will drag the dirt out from under the rug. They will drag the skeletons out of the closet to try and discredit a particular candidate as much as possible. Now, with Donald Trump, they did that, and they didn't really have anything else to go on except for his crude behavior. And so a lot of what turned voters off to Donald Trump was his crude behavior, especially behavior that he exemplified many, many years ago, say in the latter half of the 1980s or the 1990s even. And then people really didn't like his approach during his run for president back in 2016, and they didn't like how he interacted with people. He wasn't very presidential, and by that, really, they mean he's not a politician, right? He is a businessman that came into the situation from outside the political arena and ran for president. And as bad as you might not like to admit it, that is what our founding fathers had in mind. Our founding fathers did not imagine or envisage this situation in which there's this aristocracy, and we only pull politicians from those circles or that aristocratic circle, and these these politically elite people, which is what's happened for many, many years, right? You kind of have a tinge of nepotism. I mean, with George H.W. Bush and then George W. Bush serving 8 years after his father did, after the long and terrible reign of Bill Clinton. And so, we've been caught in this cycle as a country of electing people, or only having the choice to elect people who came from within the swamp, is what a lot of people will call it. But Donald Trump comes from outside the swamp, and I understand that people don't like his personality or whatever, but that's kind of what the founding fathers imagined. So he's not a politician, so he's not going to be polished. Externally, he's going to look like garbage sometimes. That's just the truth of the matter. Should he look like garbage externally? No, he shouldn't. But here's the thing. The people who we have been electing over the last few decades, they may look polished on the outside, but they are terrible people on the outside, all right? So really, this whole idea that, he's not, we need to be looking for someone who has impeccable character and looks presidential at all times. Inside, they may be terrible people, as long as they look right. It's this idea of like a desire for hypocrisy in the White House that I don't think is healthy. And not only that, but if you're looking for impeccable character and you're getting hung up on character flaws, you're really not, if you're consistent, you're not going to be able to vote for anybody. You're not going to be able to ever vote for anybody. It's really just a question of degrees at that point, which I think you have to really be arbitrary about in kind of drawing your line. And a lot of that comes down to Christian conscience and all that. But don't get caught up in character flaws without also looking at the policy. Now that brings me to point number 3. Look for policy. Now I say look for policy because I'm not saying that you need to go out and vote for your favorite person. In fact, there are people that I like, which if those same people ran for president, I would not vote for them. Right? I like, I don't know, just throw anybody out there. I mean, I like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. Does that mean I would vote for him as president? No, it doesn't, because I just don't think he's fit for the job or whatever. That's just an example. Take it for what it's worth. But don't look for the person. Look for their policy. Look for their stated policy, and that's number 3. Look for policy that specifically encourages life. And immediately you probably begin to think, look for policy that hinders the abortion industry in this nation. And that's indeed what I'm saying. And it's actually more expansive than just that. I'm talking about life in general. Look for a policy that encourages life, and especially that militates against the abortion industry that's currently the norm in this country. Look for political candidates that are going to encourage life and discourage the opposite, right? And I think that's a good rule of thumb. So just ask yourself, which political candidate encourages life more, not perfectly, because they're not going to perfectly encourage life, but which political candidate is going to encourage life more than the other guy, all right? Number 4, look for policy that deregulates obstacles to liberties that we all should be enjoying as Americans. So, for example, if you have a political candidate that is wanting to rob Peter to pay Paul, say through taxation, I would say that that's a pretty good red flag that you shouldn't vote for that person. And the reason for that is because that person is going to step on liberty. All right, that person is going to step on our liberties. Not only that, but there are several other policies at play, especially in this current election cycle, that can really make or break the quality of liberty that we have in this nation, which is already degrading in some measure. So look for policy that deregulates or gets rid of obstacles to liberty, and measure liberty, of course, according to the Constitution. But if you're having a hard time defining what liberty is, as a Christian, we don't believe that liberty is just the ability to be able to go out and do whatever in the world we want to do. As a Christian, specifically, be asking the question and considering, are the policies that this person is putting forth going to allow me to serve God in the greatest capacity possible that I can as an individual American citizen. All right. Are these policies going to be conducive to my life, my public life as a Christian? Okay, so look for policy that is going to obliterate obstacles to that. All right, look for policy that is going to more fully observe our liberties, thereby making provision for you to live a fruitful Christian life in this country. Number 5, look for policy that encourages the good and makes evil difficult. And the reason I said makes evil difficult is because there's obviously evil that our government cannot punish. There's evil of the heart. There are certain evils that are committed within the walls of people's homes that our government just can't punish directly through the judicial system that we currently have in place. So look for candidates that are going to encourage the good, and by good I mean good according to a biblical standard, and I could get more technical and say good really according to the standard of natural law. That's going to encourage good. It's going to encourage obedience to natural law or God's moral law, and it's going to make it very difficult for people to be evil people and still live a good life in this society. Okay. And with that, I would just say, look for candidates who are going to give themselves to encouraging a judicial system by appointing or nominating judges, for example, that are going to review evil cases that have been decided on in the past. Look for presidents or presidential candidates who are going to actively work to improve the way our country does justice, and make sure that they are going to do so according to a moral standard that is in line with the morality that God has woven throughout the fabric of this creation through natural law. 6, consider the candidate who is least likely to obstruct the church's mission. Abraham Kuyper said something like, it's in the American arrangement, that's the wording he used, it's the American arrangement that has ensured the church's fulfillment of her mission most fully. America is the first place wherein the church has been able to observe her duty and to fulfill her duty without coercion from the government. And it's one of the first places in which the government has been able to fulfill its duty of bearing the sword, for example, without coercion or too much unfettered influence from the church. And so there has been a proper distinction between church and state, where the state has been able to fulfill its God-given duties and the church has been able to fulfill her God-given duties. And that's happened to the fullest extent in the American arrangement. So consider the candidate who is least likely to obstruct the church's mission. You know, right now we see various governors throughout the nation ordering churches to shut down, right? And telling churches and pastors that they have to close their doors or else. Look for candidates who don't do that. Look for candidates who are strong, willed, and willing to stand up against infringements against the First Amendment, for example. Number 7, consider the candidate who will most likely minister for our good during their tenure. Consider the candidate who will most likely minister for our good during their tenure. We have to remember that in Romans 13, what is the purpose of the civil magistrate? Well, it's to be a minister for our good and a terror to evil. So look for candidates who are most likely to serve in that capacity. And we know that they're not going to be perfect instantiations of obedience to Romans 13. But again, you have a selection, right, between 2 or more political candidates, and you really just have to go with the one that is going to be most in line with a Christian idyllic and standard. It's never going to be perfect, but you can vote for people, you can choose people who are going to be better than others. They're going to encourage more good than others, right? They're going to deregulate obstacles to liberty more so than others might. They're going to encourage life more than others might, right? So you're going to look for a candidate who is going to do something better, not perfect, but better than the other guy. Anyways, I hope this was helpful, guys. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you were able to be encouraged or engaged in this brief conversation. About 15 minutes now, so I'm going to go ahead and jump off here. If you liked this video, please give me a like, a thumbs up. If you didn't, let me know why in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for continued notifications. God bless you guys.